The Sony Alpha 67, the Fuji X-S20. Is this the vlogging slash content creating camera that we all been waiting on? Let's talk about it.
They don't think we can keep making hits about cameras, but I'm the cameraman. But I'm the cameraman. Stay creamy. Yeah, started on a 50 mil lens.
Hey, if this is your first time coming to the channel, I'd like to welcome you. This is Lessons Learned with Cameras. My name is Willie. So I've been away from this tech channel for about 3 months shy of a year. While I was gone, I've got rid of some of my Sony cameras that I've been shooting on for quite some time, like my A7C, my 6100, my RX100 Mark 7, and my ZVE10. Now, I do currently still own my FX3 that I'm shooting on right now, and I also own the FX30 and the ZV1. The FX30 wasn't really bought as a replacement camera for the ZVE10, but more or less as a B camera for my FX3 when I'm shooting videos for my other channel. Since getting back to this, I found myself thinking about getting another APS-C camera, but it would have to meet minimum requirements, meaning it would have to shoot in at least 4K 60, have to have minimum to no overheating, decent, not perfect autofocus, decent, not perfect IBIS, compact, not break the bank, and last but not least, the most important one, it would have to be fun. That was my basic requirement. Realistic expectations, not expecting it to compete with my FX3 or my FX30. So it pretty much came down to two cameras that were in the finals, one being the Sony A6700 and second being the Fuji X-S20. Now, obviously, I'm a Sony shooter. All the cameras that I own, or at least the serious ones, all come from the Sony lineup, even down to the camcorders that I currently still own and shoot on from my other channel, story for another day. And Fuji, I've never picked up a Fuji camera in my life or even seen one in person. So this would be an interesting toss-up between one ecosystem that I'm very familiar with versus another one that I've never even touched base on or even thought about researching it. Well, obviously you could tell, hence the name of the video, I went with the Fuji X-S20. Now, this video is just going to be my first impressions, like straight out of the box, with realistic expectations for a camera at this price point. It really won't go into all the details of the specifications and the performance features of this camera. All that'll come in due time once I get more familiar with the camera. But I just want to be realistic for what I expect from a camera at this price point and see if it achieves those expectations. Okay, full disclosure, any comparisons that I do with the Fuji X-S20, especially against its predecessor, the X-S10, it's surely done off of just research that I've done, comparing these two cameras to each other and what are some of the new features. But I'm probably going to leave a lot of that out of this first impression because it's not a firsthand experience. It's just based off of knowledge that I acquired through research and studies. Speaking of research, the one thing that I did notice when trying to look up videos on YouTube in regards to the Fuji camera, there's not a lot of videos in regards to vlogging or video content creating with a Fuji camera, but there is a lot about photography. So for me, I mean, I'm more of a video centric shooter. I would say 99% video, 1% photography. So that did create a little bit of a learning curve. So at first glance out of the box, I do like the build quality. It feels light, compact with simple customizable dials and a good feeling grip. It kind of gives you that retro feel without the silver color. And from the looks of it, you also get the feeling that you can carry this camera around with you all day. It does have mic and headphone jacks on opposite sides. It also has a USB-C charging port that can be used to plug your camera directly as a webcam and a micro HDMI port. The single SD card slot is located in the battery compartment. Not really my thing nowadays, but overall not a big deal. It's also compatible with UHS 2 SD cards, which is a plus. Once you open the fully articulating screen, you'll notice that there's a connection port for a cooling fan to be attached separately. Now, this cooling fan, I mean, it's not cheap. You know, I think it runs for about $200-ish, but it's definitely a good option to have if you're a person that likes to shoot long form video content or shooting 4K 60 and above, or if you're just a person that's shooting in hot weather conditions. I'm gonna get off path a little bit and just want to touch on this little side rant that I got about Fuji ecosystem. And this is all new to me, but from what I could see at first impression, it does seem like the Fuji ecosystem is a little more expensive to be in outside of or excluding the camera bodies. The camera bodies are pretty reasonably priced with its competition, but I noticed like the lenses, man, Fuji lenses are really expensive and there's not a lot of third-party choices out there. Luckily for me, the third-party choices or the focal lengths that I like, There are third-party choices that I can go with. Back to the video. The thing I noticed once I got into the Fuji menu system, it's quite intuitive, kind of comparable to the Sony menu system. But the thing that stuck out to me in a positive way was the fact that Fuji gives you a lot more control of the functionality of your camera versus, let's say, Sony. I had controls of things, or I could manipulate things that I could not do even in my FX3 or my FX30, which I think that's a positive, but it can also be a double-edged sword depending on where you are in your experience level with camera operations. But for me, I'm kind of middle of the road, and I really appreciated having that type of control. I purchased my XS20 with the 15-45 OSS kit lens, but you can also pick up the 18-55. I also purchased the Fuji 16mm f1.4 prime, but I'll do a video on that at a later date. Okay, so that's enough with the talking. Let's go ahead and take this camera and get out in the field, do a quick field test, and then come back for some final thoughts. Okay, so today I'm out here with the Fuji X-S20 using my Rode Wireless Go for external audio. I got it set in vlog mode so you can see how that looks. I currently have IBIS digital image stabilization engaged. Also with the lens, the 15-45 Fuji kit lens that has OIS enabled. So how does that look? And again, if you've been to this channel before, you know I don't believe in doing that ninja walk stuff. Nobody walks like that. You look like a goofball. Plus, I want you to kind of see how it is, just unassisted and no crazy measures implemented to try to make the footage more stable. So that's what you get for regular picture quality. I'm going into a dark area, so I'm gonna pick it up on the other side. Right now I have it set to autofocus, but I'm using face detect instead of eye detect autofocus. One of the things I notice with the eye autofocus, I just don't really get that warm and fuzzy feeling that everything's being tracked right. I did some tests at home and didn't really get that vote of confidence with that. I feel a little better about the face detect autofocus. So now you can see I'm in kind of a shaded area. Just want to see if it's still tracking, which from looking in the screen, it looks like it still is. But I won't be able to see how good that looks until I get back into the studio. So as for the focal length, is this a good focal length? Again, this is 15mm on the kit lens, but I want to say full frame equivalent. I want to say it's around 22.5 full frame equivalent. Don't quote me on that, somewhere around there. Then you add a little bit of the digital image stabilization. Now you're looking at a 1.1 crop. Don't quote me on that. So I don't know. I mean, it still stays within what's reasonable tolerance for what a good, you know, focal length would be for vlogging. It doesn't look like my face is just taking up the whole entire screen. See, that was kind of one of my, I'm not gonna say like negative outlooks with this camera, but I did go back after I did the talking head part of this video in the studio, and I noticed that there is some videos out there in reference to this camera. But the thing that I noticed was this. I guess when this camera was released, it was kind of released side by side with the 8mm f3.5 prime lens, and it was kind of being passed off that that would be the good vlogging setup or for this particular camera body. And in reality, 8mm, the footage looks like crap in video if you're walking around with it. Like if you're static somewhere, it looks beautiful as long as the lighting conditions are, you know, conducive to where you're sitting at or setting up. But I could say if you're walking around with 8mm, even with the full frame equivalent of 12mm, and then add in the digital crop on top of that, it still doesn't put you in a good area. I'll say this much. For a vlogging lens, I think good focal length is anywhere between 16 to 24 full frame equivalent. Now, it doesn't matter how you get there, whether it's assisted with digital image stabilization and so forth, but I think by itself, 8mm Bumping up to 12 millimeter, possibly getting up to 14, just isn't good. It just doesn't look good in video. So I just think it's kind of misleading. I think what was going on with Fuji with that was they were premiering this new lens around the same time they premiered this camera. So they wanted to pair them together and call it the vlogging setup. So don't be deceived with that. All right, so right now we're going to go ahead and get into some stabilization tests here. Right now it's currently in vlog mode and I have the OIS, IBIS, and DIS engaged. So how does that look? I've been using it pretty much the whole time, but just to kind of give you an example there. And again, no crazy walking, just letting you see how that look. Don't know why now I keep running into all these shaded areas. So next we're going to go ahead and do the test with no stabilization at all. Okay, so this is with all the stabilization cut off. How does that look? Can't really tell by looking into the display screen. Okay, I can see that shake right there. But that's what you get with no stabilization at all. Okay, so now this is just with the IBIS and the OIS that's in the lens. No DIS, so shouldn't be a crop this time. How does that look for stabilization? Should give you more of me in the picture. Well, it shouldn't be so close cropped in on my face now, but I don't know how stable this is without using that assisted DIS. Happen to be walking by an area where they're doing some leaf blowing. So yeah, that is with OIS and IBIS engaged. Another cool feature about this camera, it has this option called film simulation. What that does is straight out of the camera, it gives you a pretty cool color profile. And for someone like me, that definitely is worth it because I'm not big into color grading and correcting. It's not really one of my strong points. So anything that helps with the editing process is always appreciated. So let's look at some of those and see what those look like. This is the one called Eterna Film Simulation. A lot of people rave about this online and what I've seen on other YouTube videos. I can't really tell what sunglasses on and looking at the display screen, but it looks like it would be like more of a Cinetone type of profile, but that's what you get for the Eterna. So let me go ahead and switch to another one. And this is the black and white one. I forgot the name of it. Gives you a different look for your video footage. I think it's kind of cool to play around with it. Don't think I ever shoot in black and white, but hey, it's cool to have those options. And that's what my point I'm kind of getting at with this camera. It's really a fun camera. It gives you different options that other APS-C cameras don't give you. And that's a little bit of SEPA. I think that's what it's called, SEPA. But see, I could sit here and make a video just on the film simulations alone. Just something to play with. Again, probably not a feature that I'm going to be utilizing a lot, but still, you know, it's really cool, especially if I decide to use that 1% of my photography deal and take a couple of photos. This is really cool to have this in the camera itself. Right now that's at 15 millimeters. I'll go ahead and zoom in a little bit. That's at 19, 25, oh, 30, 34, and then that's all the way at 45 millimeters. So that's what you get for the zoom feature with this kit lens. I think is really cool. I don't have a problem with this kit lens. I tell you what, let me flip the camera back around. So I'll tell you what, the thing I noticed with this zoom lens compared to the one that came with a lot of my Sony APS-C cameras, that pancake lens, 16-50, I think. This one, man, this zoom lens seemed more quality. And I know a lot of people say, oh man, that's a cheap lens and everything else. And I get it, it is a cheap lens. but for the quality that comes out of it, and I mean, I'm willing to see what it looks like when I test it in the studio. Wouldn't really use a kit lens in the studio, but I'm just saying, I'm really impressed with the quality of it. I don't expect it to perform like the 16mm f1.4 prime because I know what that lens can do, or at least I know what that focal length and that aperture setting wide open could do. So I think a lot of times, man, with these kit lenses, a lot of people try to turn you off to them. But again, straight out of the box, I think this kit lens is not bad. I prefer the 15mm over the 16. Anything that's going to give me a wider focal length, because I know with a lot of these APS-C crop style sensors, once you have to apply all the conversions, like the full frame equivalent, and then with the stabilization, with the 1.1s and the whatever crop factors, you're going to lose a lot of your focal length, and then you're going to be kind of in the regular range. So I appreciate having the 15mm, especially over the 16mm. Some people say 1mm, what's the difference? But I think, again, if you're going to be adding the stabilization and all these crops, and then taking in the full frame equivalent conversion, you do kind of need a wide enough angle lens to be on your APS-C camera. But again, you don't need 8mm. 8mm is ridiculous. I think that lens itself was geared more towards photography. Most people won't say that because they try to show people videoing with that lens. But the reality, again, the footage looks like garbage because all back here is all wavy and then it's shaking like that the whole time. I was not impressed with that at all, not one bit. So that's what I took from it when I seen that they were trying to pitch this lens with this camera, was the fact that they had a release of both items kind of around the same time. But again, my take on it, just letting you know from a realistic standpoint, from a person that do vlogging videos, I don't vlog, like that's not really my thing no more. But I try to do these videos just to kind of see a baseline of what it would perform like if a person was vlogging with it, versus it being an afterthought, trying to pair it with something that it really doesn't go with. And right now, this is with the internal audio. How did that sound for sound quality? Okay, the camera's about arm's length away from me, and this is what you get for the internal audio sound. Now, I don't know, maybe I'll walk back over here and see if I get closer to some of this water and stuff like that to see, to kind of give you a true, accurate depiction of the internal audio. But this is what it sounds like in an area where there's not a lot of ambient noises. And this is what you get for internal audio. Okay, real quick before I forget it, I want to talk about who this camera is for and who it's not for. I think this camera is for someone who needs a good B cam, especially paired up with that Fuji X-S20. I think this will make a really good B cam. I think this camera is for someone who wants to have total control over the video functionality of their camera and want to get the maximum output out of it. I think this camera is for someone who's new or someone who's been in the game for a while. I just think the versatility of this camera is like far surpasses a lot of other cameras, that definitely ones that I've used, and it's definitely up to par with some of my higher end cameras. So let's talk about who this camera isn't for. It's not for someone who just want total simplicity. What I mean by that is there's plenty of more cost-friendly options if you just want like plug and play, just, you know, go whatever. I mean, there's plenty of point and shoot cameras, even if it's not made by Fuji. There's point and shoot cameras out there, there's action cameras and so forth. So there's your iPhone, or there's your phone in general. So there's plenty of options for someone who just wants simplicity. I would say this camera is simple. It gives you a lot of controls. And if that's more or less what you're looking for, I wouldn't want to spend the extra money to get all this and what this camera can offer. And I can just get something that's a lot more cost or budget friendly. Now, some of the video features that may be kind of intimidating to somebody who just got this camera and just initially starting, like there's a lot of different bit rates, there's different codecs. I mean, you got, like I said, 6.2 open gate, you have the 4K DCI, you have your 120, your 60 frames. So you have a lot of different options that some cameras at this price point, or most at this price point, don't even offer that. So to me, that is very intriguing alone. Now, there are some downfalls to this camera. I've noticed since I'm coming in close to the end of this little vlog segment. The stabilization, no, it's not up to par with like my FX30 or my FX3. but is it better than my ZV-E10 one was? Yes, hands down. So yes, if you can get past the stabilization issue or even the autofocus kind of leaves me a little worried sometimes. But again, my workaround, I just put it on, subject autofocus or face detect versus eye detect, and I haven't had a problem with it, at least from what I can see in the display screen. I would say too, with this camera, it's Fuji. I think Fuji leads the market when it comes to the color science, but I don't know. With Sony, I trust it. It's reliable. With Fuji, I'm going to have to try to build that type of relationship. So that's going to be a little bit of a learning curve over time for me to develop that type of trust. So I think this will be it for the vlog test. I'm going to go ahead and get back home, put this in post, and we'll go ahead and finish this video up with my final thoughts. Okay, back from the field. Before we get into final thoughts, I just thought about it. I want to go ahead and do a quick in-studio setup just to see how this camera looks set up in the studio. I think first I'm going to try with the 15-45 just to show you what you can get if you had no other option but to use the kit lens in the studio. And then I may switch to my Fuji 16mm just to see how that looks. So we're going to go ahead and set that up. 1, 2, 3. And this is with the Fuji X-S20 with the 15-45 kit lens. How does that look for picture quality? Right now it looks like everything is tracking fine. The box is around my head for the autofocus. Hopefully it looks good. Because the lighting ain't the way I probably should set it for using this particular lens, which I would never use this in a studio setting, but this is just to show you if you had to use this, this is pretty much the quality that you could probably produce out of this camera. And I didn't do a lot of adjustments versus what I had for my FX3. It's just that obviously this lens is going to need more light because at the widest end, it's a 3.5. So, you take what you get with that. But overall, I don't think it's bad, at least from what I could see on the screen, which is really not a lot. But I don't know. Overall, it's not bad. We'll just go ahead and finish final thoughts on the kit lens. I don't feel like setting back up the FX3. But these are my final thoughts. I think in the past, the gap used to be wider between these different cameras with the specs and the features. I think as more time goes on and as time progresses, I think that gap is starting to get lesser and lesser with each camera maker or whatever. I mean, it seems like now this APS-C camera being able to do OpenGate 6.2K, being able to have all the different codecs in it and stuff like that. I mean, it's literally a mini cinema camera. Like I would compare this more to the Fuji HS2, I think that's what it is. Or maybe my FX30 or FX3 when it comes to the cinema side of the house. I mean, I wouldn't put it directly against those, but you get what I'm saying. It would kind of go up against more or less one of those cameras. I could see this being a B cam for the Fuji HX-S2 or XHS2, but I see this being a B cam to that. So just like my FX30 is to the FX3. But I like this camera. I think it's really fun. I have no regrets in getting it. I'm glad I did pick it over the A6700. A6700 would have been my comfort zone. I would have got it, would have played with it for a little bit, and 9 out of 10, I probably would have ditched it in about a year or so, because really there's only 2 cameras that is staying in my lineup for a very long time without me ditching it. It's my FX3 and my FX30, and really my FX3 is the only one that's staying. But, over time, a camera, you start to play with it so much, it gets boring and you want to move on. So I don't think this is one I'm going to be moving on from for no time soon. So stay tuned. There will be more video content with this Fuji camera. Again, I'm not the photography guy. I'm pretty sure there's plenty of creators for that. But I'm mainly going to focus on video and making video content with this camera as I, start learning more things and progressing in my journeys within the Fuji ecosystem. So if you want to see more videos like that, make sure you stay tuned. If you like this channel and you felt anything I covered today was informative, feel free to drop a like, and I will see you in the next video.